Late night. Luxury hospital. A young CEO, face pale as death, rushed on a gurney into the emergency room, unaware that the man about to save her life wore a security guard's uniform. If you believe invisible heroes deserve recognition, hit subscribe. Doubters won't. Comment, heroes wear all uniforms if you stand against judging people by their job titles. The fluorescent lights of St. Haven Hospital's emergency entrance cast harsh shadows across the rain-slicked pavement. It was 11:30 on a Thursday night when a universe decided to collide two worlds that had no business meeting. Olivia Hart's designer clothes were torn beyond recognition, soaked crimson with blood that pooled beneath her on the paramedic stretcher. Her breathing came in shallow, desperate gasps. The woman who commanded boardrooms with surgical precision, who'd built a tech empire before turning 35, now gripped a nurse's trembling hand with the terror of someone who'd just glimpsed mortality's cold face. "Wait," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the controlled chaos. "Please, just make it fast. I don't want the pain." The nurse's eyes darted frantically down the corridor. Dr. Reyes was stuck somewhere in traffic, unreachable, impossibly far away. Olivia's blood pressure was dropping like a stone thrown into dark water. There was no time for protocols or procedures or waiting for the right credentials. That's when he appeared. Ethan Ward wasn't supposed to be in the emergency bay. His rounds typically kept him on the upper floors, checking locked doors and ensuring the late-night quiet remained undisturbed. But something, instinct, fate, the muscle memory of 1,000 crisis moments, pulled him toward the commotion. He was 38 years old, broad-shouldered but not intimidating, with eyes that carried the weight of things most people never see. The old security jacket he wore hung loose on his frame. The hospital logo faded from too many wash cycles. To anyone passing by, he was invisible, forgettable, just another working man counting down hours until dawn. But when those ambulance doors burst open and he heard the panic in the nurse's voice, major impact, possible internal bleeding, BP dropping fast, something ancient awakened inside him. Years of training don't just fade. They live in your hands, your heartbeat, the way your body moves before your mind catches up. "What happened?" His voice cut through the chaos with startling calm. "Car crash," the nurse stammered, her professionalism cracking at the edges. "Downtown bridge. Single vehicle." Ethan's eyes swept across Olivia's broken form. He cataloged everything in seconds. The pallor of her skin, the irregular rise and fall of her chest, the way her fingers had gone cold. He'd seen this before. Mosul, Kandahar. Firefights where the sand turned red, and the only thing between a soldier and death was the medic willing to run toward the screaming. He stripped off his security jacket without hesitation, covering her torso to preserve heat, to offer dignity in a moment that had stolen everything else. "You'll be okay," he said, his voice carrying an authority that had nothing to do with his hospital badge. "I promise." As he took her hand, the emergency lights caught something on his wrist, numbers tattooed in black ink, faded but permanent. Military medic identification. The kind you wear so they can identify your body when words no longer work. Olivia's eyes, glazed with shock and pain, focused on those numbers. Something in her expression shifted. Recognition, perhaps, or simply the primal understanding that the hands holding hers had held others on the edge of the abyss. "What's your name?" Ethan asked, his fingers already finding her pulse point, counting, calculating. She tried to answer, but the words dissolved into a gasp. He leaned closer, his face inches from hers, blocking out the harsh lights and frightened faces. "Stay with me," he commanded gently. "Focus on my voice. You're safe now. I've got you." The nurse watched in stunned silence as this security guard, this nobody in a faded uniform, moved with the precision of a surgeon and the confidence of someone who'd cheated death so many times they were on first-name basis. He applied pressure to the bleeding on Olivia's arm, stabilized her neck, monitored her breathing. His hands never trembled. His voice never wavered. In that moment, he wasn't Ethan Ward, single father working the night shift to make rent. He was something else entirely. He was who he used to be. Not tonight. He told her firmly when her eyes started to flutter closed. "You're going to see the sunrise." Something in those words, maybe their certainty, maybe their kindness, made her believe him. Her trembling hand reached out blindly, desperately. He caught it, held it tight, and anchored her to the world she was slipping away from. When Dr. Reyes finally burst through the doors 7 minutes later, Olivia's vitals had stabilized. The immediate crisis had passed. The doctor stared at the monitors, then at Ethan, then back at the monitors. "You did this." Ethan stepped back into the shadows where he belonged. "Just kept her steady, document. You saved her life." But Ethan was already moving away, letting the professionals take over, becoming invisible again. As they wheeled Olivia towards surgery, she turned her head with great effort, searching for him through the blur of motion and medication. Their eyes met one final time across the fluorescent chaos. She mouthed 2 words, "Thank you." He simply nodded and disappeared into the hallway shadows like morning mist. Just another night shift. Just another life saved. In the hospital cafeteria, Grace Ward, 8 years old, 3rd grade, eyes like her father's, looked up from her coloring book as Ethan approached. She was drawing hearts and stars, waiting like she did every night for her dad to finish keeping the world safe in ways nobody noticed. "Dad, look what I drew." Ethan smiled, the tension draining from his shoulders as he ruffled her dark hair. "It's perfect, sweetheart. Let's go home." He never mentioned what happened in the emergency bay. Heroes, he learned long ago, don't need headlines. They just need to show up when the darkness comes calling. Outside, the rain continued to fall on the city that never knew how close it came to losing one of its brightest stars. Should I continue with Chapter 2? Sunlight poured through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the private recovery room like liquid gold. Olivia's heart woke slowly, her body screaming protests with every shallow breath. Stitches pulled tight across her arm. Bandages wrapped her ribs like armor she hadn't asked for. Her head pounded with the rhythm of her own heartbeat. But she was alive. The realization hit her with unexpected force. She'd whispered those words in the ambulance. Asterisk, just make it fast, asterisk, fully believing they'd be among her last. Yet here she was, bathed in morning light, exactly as he'd promised. "You're going to see the sunrise." Fragments of the night returned in disjointed flashes. The crash, the screaming metal, the taste of copper in her mouth, strong hands holding hers, a voice cutting through the terror with impossible calm. And those eyes, steady, certain, belonging to someone who'd walked through fire before and learned not to flinch. Who was he? A nurse entered, checking the monitors with practiced efficiency. Olivia's voice came out hoarse, damaged. "Excuse me. Last night, there was a man who helped me. Before the doctor arrived." The nurse smiled warmly. "Oh, you mean Ethan? The security guard?" "Yeah, he was incredible. Kept you stable until Dr. Reyes got here. You're lucky he was there." Security guard. The words settled strangely in Olivia's mind. She'd been saved by a security guard. Not a surgeon. Not some renowned specialist. A man who checked doors and walked hallways for minimum wage. Where is he now? Probably home. His shift ended at 6. The nurse left, and Olivia sat alone with thoughts that wouldn't settle. She'd spent her entire adult life believing that power came from titles, that competence lived in corner offices, that the people who mattered wore expensive suits and commanded 7-figure salaries. Yet the man who'd pulled her back from death's edge wore a faded security jacket. Around mid-morning, her assistant Marcus burst through the door, arms loaded with her phone, tablet, and an expression carved from pure worry. "Miss Hart, thank God. The board's asking questions. Media wants statements. They know about the accident." Olivia pushed herself upright, wincing. "What are they saying?" "Just that you were in a single-car crash. They want confirmation you're okay." And Marcus hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "Some reporters are asking who saved you." There were witnesses in the ER. Olivia stared out the window at the city sprawling below. From up here, people looked like ants. Insignificant, interchangeable. How many times had she looked down from her office tower and thought exactly that? "Tell them a medical team handled everything professionally," she said finally, her voice cold and executive. No need for dramatics. Should we mention the security guard? I heard. No. The word came out sharper than she intended. No names. No unnecessary attention. Marcus nodded and stepped into the hallway to make calls. Olivia watched him go, feeling something uncomfortable twist in her chest. She told herself it was protection, privacy, good PR strategy. But deep down, in a place she rarely acknowledged, she knew the truth. She was ashamed. Ashamed that she needed saving. Ashamed that her savior wore a uniform she'd never have noticed in 1,000 hospital visits. Ashamed that her carefully constructed world of control and power had shattered so completely in a single moment of vulnerability. So she did what she always did when faced with uncomfortable truths. She buried them. Ethan returned to St. Haven just past noon, earlier than usual. Grace had a play date at a friend's house, giving him a rare window of solitude. He'd planned to sleep, but sleep hadn't come. Instead, he'd lain awake watching sunlight crawl across the ceiling, thinking about the woman with terrified eyes who'd whispered for mercy in the dark. He wondered if she'd made it through surgery, if she'd woken up, if she'd remember anything at all. The hospital felt different in daylight, busier, louder, less forgiving. Ethan moved through the corridors with the quiet efficiency of someone who'd learned to take up as little space as possible. He nodded to familiar faces, checked in with the day shift supervisor, picked up his assignment sheet for the evening. That's when he saw her. Olivia stood near the elevator bank on the 3rd floor, leaning heavily on a crutch, her designer hospital robe probably costing more than his monthly rent. Her assistant hovered nearby, speaking in low, urgent tones. Even injured, even vulnerable, she carried herself with the rigid posture of someone who'd learned early that showing weakness was suicide. Their eyes met across the hallway. For a moment, neither moved. Recognition flickered in her expression. Surprise, then something harder to name. Discomfort, perhaps, or calculation. Ethan's instinct was to walk away, to let her recovery continue without the awkwardness of gratitude or obligation. He'd done his job. That was enough. It had to be enough. But before he could turn, a young nurse named Jenny appeared at his elbow. Hey, Ethan. Miss Hart was asking about you this morning. You should go say hi. She probably wants to thank you. Ethan shook his head slightly. I'm sure she's busy. I've got rounds. Don't be modest. You save her life. The words carried across the space between them. Olivia's assistant, Marcus, turned sharply, whispered something Ethan couldn't hear. But he saw Olivia's face harden, saw the walls slam back into place behind her eyes. Still, she called out. Professional. Controlled. Wait, you're Ethan, right? He stopped, turned slowly. Yes, ma'am. She limped closer, each step clearly painful, but executed with stubborn determination. Marcus trailed behind like a shadow, his expression unreadable. When she reached Ethan, she studied him with the same intensity she probably used in boardrooms, measuring, assessing, cataloging. I wanted to thank you, she said carefully, for last night. Just doing my job, ma'am. The formality hung between them like glass. Marcus leaned in, his voice low, but not quite low enough. Miss Hart, the PR team said it's better if we don't create a narrative around this. You know how media twists things. Ethan watched something shift in Olivia's face. The brief softness vanished, replaced by the armor of a woman who'd built an empire by never showing her hand. She looked at Ethan directly now, her voice taking on the crisp efficiency of a business transaction. I appreciate what you did, but I'd prefer if you kept last night between us. I don't need rumors or attention. I'm sure you understand. The words landed like stones. Ethan's expression didn't change. Years of combat had taught him to keep his face neutral when bullets flew. This was just another kind of fire. Wasn't planning to talk about it, he said evenly. Good. She paused, and, for just a fraction of a second, something almost human crossed her features. I don't like owing people. He looked at her, really looked at her, and saw what she couldn't see herself. Fear wearing a power suit. Vulnerability disguised as control. A woman so terrified of appearing weak that she'd weaponize her own rescue. Then don't, ma'am, he said quietly. Just live better. He turned and walked away before she could respond. Olivia stood frozen in the hallway, Marcus already pulling out his phone to manage whatever crisis came next. But she couldn't move, couldn't think. That last sentence echoed in her head with the force of a judge's gavel. Just live better. Not you're welcome. Not it was nothing. Not the gracious acceptance of gratitude she'd expected from someone in his position. Instead, he'd held up a mirror she didn't want to look into. Jenny found Ethan in the staff break room 20 minutes later, staring at cold coffee he hadn't touched. That was cold, she said softly. What she said to you? It's fine. It's not fine. You save her life. She should have. She's scared, Jenny. Ethan set down the cup, his voice tired but not angry. People do ugly things when they're scared. Doesn't make it right. Just makes it human. Jenny shook her head. You're too good for this place, Ethan. Too good for people like her. He smiled faintly. Nah, this place is exactly where I need to be. But as he left the break room and returned to his rounds, something felt different. Heavier. He'd saved countless lives in combat, had walked away from gratitude and medals and recognition more times than he could count. So why did this one sting? Maybe because for just a moment, when her hand had gripped his in that emergency room, he'd seen past the CEO and the billions and the armor. He'd seen a terrified human being who needed help. And he genuinely believed she might remember what that felt like. Outside the hospital windows, the afternoon sun climbed higher, indifferent to the small dramas playing out in fluorescent hallways below. Ethan picked up Grace from her play date at 5:30, the tension from the afternoon still sitting heavy in his chest. She bounced into the car with the boundless energy only 8-year-olds possess, her backpack trailing behind her like a cape. Dad, guess what happened at school today? He forced a smile, pulling into traffic. What's that, sweetheart? Mrs. Patterson said Hart Tech donated a whole bunch of computers to our school. We're getting tablets and everything. Isn't that so cool? Ethan's hands tightened on the steering wheel. Hart Tech. Of course. Yeah, kiddo. That's really generous of them. Grace chattered on about the new technology lab, about how they'd learn coding and digital art, her words tumbling over each other in excitement. Ethan listened, responding at the right moments, but his mind was elsewhere. That evening, they stopped at the grocery store. Grace pushed the cart while Ethan checked his list, trying to stretch their budget through another week. Pasta, rice, whatever vegetables were on sale. The same careful mathematics he performed every Sunday. They were in the cereal aisle when Grace suddenly went quiet. Ethan looked up to find her staring at a magazine display near the checkout lanes. There, on the cover of 3 different business magazines, was Olivia Hart. Youngest self-made billionaire reveals success secrets. The woman who revolutionized tech. Olivia Hart, the CEO who never sleeps. Grace picked up one of the magazines, studying the glossy cover with curious intensity. She's really rich, huh? Yeah, she is. Do you think she's happy? The question caught Ethan off guard. He knelt down beside his daughter, meeting her eyes. Why do you ask that? Grace shrugged, tracing the magazine cover with one finger. She looks lonely, like she doesn't have anybody to share her cereal with. Ethan's throat tightened. Grace had her mother's gift for seeing past surfaces, for finding the human underneath the headlines. It was a gift that still broke his heart sometimes. Maybe she is lonely, he said softly. Sometimes people who look like they have everything are missing the things that matter most. Like what? Like family. Like people who love you for who you are, not what you have. Grace put the magazine back carefully. I'm glad we're not rich then, 'cause we have each other. Ethan pulled her into a hug right there in the cereal aisle, not caring who saw. Yeah, baby. We do. Later that night, after Grace was asleep, Ethan sat on their small apartment balcony, watching the city lights blink in the distance. Somewhere out there, probably in some penthouse suite, Olivia Hart was recovering from the worst night of her life. He wondered if she was alone. He wondered if she'd always been alone, even before the accident. His phone buzzed. A text from Jenny, the nurse from earlier. Heard she's being discharged tomorrow. Private car. No press. Thought you'd want to know she's okay. Ethan typed back. Thanks for letting me know. He should have felt relief. Closure. His job was done. She'd survived. And now she'd return to her billion-dollar life while he returned to night shifts and checking doors and making sure Grace's lunch was packed for school. two separate worlds that had briefly, accidentally collided. Except Grace's words kept echoing in his mind. She looks lonely. The next morning, Ethan arrived at the hospital for his shift and learned that Olivia had already left. Clean exit, no complications, no farewell. Marcus had handled everything with military precision. Medical records transferred, follow-up appointments scheduled with private physicians, any trace of vulnerability efficiently erased. Ethan told himself it was better this way. He was checking the third-floor supply closets when he found the envelope. Plain white, his name written in elegant handwriting he didn't recognize. Inside was a check, $5,000, and a brief note on expensive stationery. For your discretion and assistance. O.H. He stared at the check for a long moment. $5,000. That was 2 months' rent. Grace's dentist bills. The car repair he'd been putting off. The new winter coat she needed but hadn't asked for because she already understood their limitations. It was also an insult. Not because of the amount, though his pride stung at being paid for something he'd never have charged for, but because of what it represented. A transaction, a closing of accounts, a way to reduce what had happened in that emergency room to something that could be balanced on a ledger and filed away. I don't like owing people, she'd said. Now the debt was paid. They were even. She could forget him completely. Ethan folded the check carefully and slipped it back into the envelope. Then he walked to the hospital's administrative office and dropped it on the director's desk with a simple note of his own. Anonymous donation to the Emergency Services Fund. EW. The director, Mrs. Chun, looked up in surprise. Ethan? What's this? Someone wanted to support the ER. Thought you'd know better how to use it than I would. This is $5,000. Then it'll do some good. He turned to leave. Wait, who's it from? Ethan paused at the door. Does it matter? Money spins the same regardless of where it comes from. He left Mrs. Chun staring at the check, already mentally cataloging the new equipment they desperately needed, the training programs they couldn't afford, the lives that $5,000 might touch. When Ethan's shift ended at 6 a.m., Grace was waiting in the cafeteria as always, surrounded by her coloring books and homework. She looked up with a sleepy smile. Ready to go home, Dad? Yeah, sweetheart. Let's go. As they walked to the car through the early morning light, Grace slipped her small hand into his. Dad, yeah. You're my favorite person in the whole world. Ethan squeezed her hand gently. You're mine too, Gracie. And in that moment, he realized something profound. Olivia Hart had tried to pay him for saving her life, not understanding that the truly valuable things, the things worth living for, could never be bought or sold. They could only be given freely. 3 weeks passed. Ethan settled back into his rhythm. Night shifts blending into dawn drives home, Grace's laughter filling the small spaces of their life, the steady predictability of checking locks and walking empty corridors. Olivia Hart became a memory, then less than that. A footnote, a moment filed away with all the other moments that don't change anything. Until the gala. St. Haven Hospital hosted its annual charity event on a cool October evening. The main ballroom transformed into something Ethan barely recognized. Crystal chandeliers, tables draped in white linen, champagne flowing like water. The city's elite gathered in designer gowns and tailored suits, writing checks that would fund another year of operations. The main sponsor was the Hart Foundation, Olivia's family charity. Ethan was assigned to security detail. Standard protocol. Check credentials at the door, monitor the exits, blend into the background. He wore his uniform. The same faded security jacket, the same invisible armor that let him move through wealthy spaces without being truly seen. He watched them arrive. Doctors he'd never spoken to. Hospital board members who didn't know his name. Politicians practicing their camera smiles. And then, precisely at 7:30, Olivia Hart. She stepped out of a black town car, wearing a midnight blue gown that probably cost more than his annual salary. Her hair was perfect. Her posture was perfect. The confident smile she gave the photographers was perfect. No trace remained of the terrified woman who'd gripped his hand and begged for the pain to end. She didn't see him. Why would she? He was part of the scenery, no more noticeable than the potted plants flanking the entrance. Ethan told himself he felt nothing watching her glide past. Told himself it didn't matter that she'd erased him so completely from her narrative. This was the natural order. She lived in one world, he in another, and that brief collision had been an anomaly, nothing more. The event began with speeches, donors congratulating themselves for their generosity, administrators praising the hospital's mission. Then Olivia took the stage, and the room fell silent with the particular reverence reserved for people who can buy and sell your future. Tonight we celebrate the incredible work of St. Haven Hospital, she said, her voice carrying effortlessly across the ballroom. A place that saves lives every single day. Ethan stood near the back wall, professionally detached, watching her perform. Heart Foundation is proud to pledge $5 million toward expanding emergency care services. Applause erupted. Cameras flashed. Olivia smiled that perfect CEO smile, accepting gratitude as though it were her birthright. Then the lights flickered. Once. Twice. The fire alarm suddenly blared to life, cutting through the applause like a scream. Confusion rippled through the crowd. Concerned murmurs, nervous laughter, people looking around for guidance. A woman's voice pierced the noise. Someone collapsed. "We need help." The panic spread faster than the alarm. Guests backed away from the left side of the ballroom, creating a circle of well-dressed spectators around a crisis none of them wanted to touch. Ethan moved before thinking. He cut through the crowd with practiced efficiency, dropping to his knees beside an elderly man sprawled on the marble floor. 70-something, face turning blue, not breathing. Cardiac arrest. Someone call 911. Ethan's voice carried command that made people obey without question. His hands found the man's chest. 30 compressions, fast and hard, the way muscle memory dictated. He tilted the head back, delivered 2 rescue breaths, returned to compressions. The crowd around him faded into white noise. There's only the rhythm. Push, 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 breathe. 15 seconds. 30. 45. Come on, Ethan muttered. Come on, stay with me. The man gasped suddenly, violently, his eyes flying open in confusion and terror. Ethan supported his head gently, keeping him stable. You're okay, sir. Stay still. Help is coming. The man's trembling hand gripped Ethan's arm with desperate strength. Thank you. Just breathe. Nice and slow. Paramedics arrived within minutes. Ethan's security colleague had radioed them immediately. They transferred the man to a stretcher with professional efficiency, taking over with the kind of calm that comes from doing this every day. Ethan stood, brushing off his knees, ready to disappear back into the shadows where he belonged. But then he felt it, the weight of eyes on him. He looked up. Olivia stood at the edge of the stage, frozen mid-step, her perfect composure cracked wide open. She watched everything, the way he moved, the precision, the complete confidence under pressure. This wasn't a lucky security guard stumbling through an emergency. This was someone who'd done this 100 times before. Her assistant Marcus leaned over, whispering something urgent. She didn't respond, didn't even acknowledge him. Her eyes stayed locked on Ethan with an expression he couldn't quite read. Recognition, maybe, or the beginning of something more dangerous. Understanding. The moment stretched between them across the crowded ballroom. Her in her $5,000 gown on an elevated stage, him in his faded uniform with someone else's blood on his hands. 2 worlds that weren't supposed to meet. Meeting again. Someone started clapping, then another person. Within seconds, the entire ballroom erupted in applause, though half of them probably didn't understand what they were applauding for. They just knew something dramatic had happened, and the man in the security uniform had been at the center of it. Ethan turned away before the attention could fully land on him. He walked toward the exit, needing air, needing distance, needing to be anywhere but under those lights. But Olivia's eyes followed him all the way to the door. And for the first time since the accident, she looked genuinely shaken. The gala continued without Ethan, but Olivia barely heard another word. She delivered the rest of her speech on autopilot, smiled for the cameras, shook hands with donors whose names evaporated from her memory the moment they walked away. Her mind was elsewhere, replaying those few minutes over and over. The way he'd moved through the crowd. The absolute certainty in his hands. The calm authority in his voice that made trained medical staff defer to him without question. This wasn't beginner's luck or adrenaline-fueled heroics. This was expertise. Marcus found her immediately after she left the stage. That was the same guy from the ER, wasn't it? The security guard. Yes. The one who saved you. Yes. Marcus studied her carefully. Miss Hart, are you all right? You look. I need his personnel file. What? Ethan Ward. I need to see his file. Now. Marcus hesitated. I'm not sure HR will release. Olivia turned to face him fully, and whatever he saw in her expression made him stop mid-sentence. Now, Marcus. 20 minutes later, she sat alone in a small conference room the hospital had provided, staring at a manila folder that felt impossibly heavy in her hands. Name, Ethan Michael Ward. Age, 38. Position, night security guard. Previous employment, United States Army combat medic, 2009 to 2019. Her hands began to tremble as she turned the page. Decorations. Silver Star for Valor, Purple Heart, 2. Army Commendation Medal Combat Medical Badge. Discharge reason, honorable, family hardship. There were photos. Ethan in full dress uniform, younger, the hard edges in his eyes not quite as deep. Medals pinned to his chest. Standing at attention with the rigid posture of someone who'd learned to carry weight most people couldn't imagine. Then a newspaper clipping, yellowed at the edges, dated 2017. Medic saves 23 soldiers during ambush. Awarded Silver Star. Olivia read with growing horror and awe. The article detailed how Ethan had run through active enemy fire, not once but repeatedly, to reach wounded soldiers. How he performed field surgeries under impossible conditions, with mortars falling around him and bullets tearing through the air. How he'd refused evacuation until every single wounded soldier was accounted for. One quote, attributed to his commanding officer, made her breath catch. Sergeant Ward didn't just save lives that day. He taught us what it means to be human when everything around you is trying to make you forget. She turned another page and found his discharge papers. The reason listed was simple, family hardship. But attached was a note from his company commander, a personal recommendation that spoke volumes. Ethan Ward is the finest medic I've served with in 20 years. His decision to leave the service to care for his daughter after his wife's death is a loss the Army will feel deeply. Any organization that employs him will be getting not just a skilled professional, but a man of extraordinary character. Olivia set down the file, her hands shaking now for entirely different reasons. This man, this decorated war hero who'd saved 23 lives under enemy fire, who'd earned the military's highest honors for valor, was working as a night shift security guard, pushing wheelchairs, checking locked doors, being invisible, and she'd offered him $5,000 to stay quiet. The shame hit her like a physical blow. She remembered her words in that hallway, the cold dismissal, the transactional cruelty. I don't like owing people. He'd saved her life twice now, once in the ER, once at the gala, and she'd treated him like an inconvenience to be managed and paid off. Marcus knocked softly and entered. Miss Hart, the car's waiting. Are you ready to? He stopped, seeing her expression. What's wrong? Olivia looked up, and for the first time in years, Marcus saw something in her eyes that looked almost like tears. I've been so blind. What do you mean? She gestured to the file. This man, Ethan Ward. Do you know what he did before he worked here? Marcus shook his head. He ran in a gunfire to save people. Repeatedly. He has a Silver Star. Marcus, do you understand what that means? Marcus picked up the file, scanning it quickly. His eyes widened. Oh my God, he's a genuine hero. Not the kind we manufacture for PR campaigns or shareholder meetings. An actual, decorated war hero. And he's been working night security here for 5 years because... She found the personal information section. Because his wife died in a car accident and he needed to be there for his 8-year-old daughter. The room fell silent except for the distant sounds of the gala continuing outside. I dismissed him, Olivia said quietly. I offered him money to forget I existed. I treated him like like he was nothing. Marcus carefully closed the file. "What do you want to do?" Olivia stood, her decision crystallizing with sudden clarity. "I want to make this right." "Ow, I don't know yet, but I'm going to figure it out." She walked to the window, overlooking the hospital's main entrance. Below, she could see Ethan leaving through the staff exit, his shift apparently over early due to the gala. He walked with his head down, hands in his pockets, completely unaware that 3 floors above him, someone was finally seeing him clearly. A small figure ran toward him from the parking lot, a young girl with dark hair. His daughter, Grace. She crashed into him with the uninhibited joy only children possess, and Ethan swept her up in his arms, spinning her around. Even from this distance, Olivia could see his face transform. The hard line softened. The weight lifted. He became someone else entirely. He became a father. Grace showed him something, a drawing, probably, and he studied it with exaggerated seriousness before ruffling her hair. They walked toward an old sedan together, Grace chattering animatedly, Ethan listening with the kind of attention that money couldn't buy. Olivia pressed her hand against the cold glass. This man had everything that mattered and nothing the world valued. She had everything the world valued and nothing that mattered. When had she lost sight of the difference? "Marcus," she said softly, not turning from the window. "Clear my schedule for tomorrow morning." "All of it. All of it. I have something more important to do." "What's that?" Olivia watched Ethan buckle Grace into the car, watched him pause to check something under the hood, the worried efficiency of someone managing a vehicle on borrowed time. Watch him finally get in and drive away into the night, just another invisible person in a city that didn't notice him. "I'm going to learn what it means to say thank you properly," she said, "and then I'm going to figure out how to become someone worthy of being saved." Marcus had worked for Olivia Hart for 7 years. He'd seen her negotiate billion-dollar deals without flinching, fire executives without hesitation, command rooms full of people twice her age with absolute authority. He'd never seen her cry. But as she stood at that window, watching taillights disappear into traffic, a single tear traced down her cheek. She wiped it away quickly, her jaw setting with familiar determination. Olivia Hart had built an empire by never backing down from challenge. This would be her hardest one yet, learning to be human again. Olivia didn't sleep that night. She sat in her penthouse apartment, surrounded by floor-to-ceiling windows that showcased a city she owned pieces of but had never truly seen. The file on Ethan Ward lay open on her glass coffee table, and she kept returning to it, reading the same passages over and over. By 3 a.m., she'd made her decision. By 6 a.m., she called an emergency meeting with her communications team. By 8 a.m., they were sitting in her office in various states of confusion and concern, coffee cups clutched like lifelines. "Absolutely not," her PR director, Patricia, said flatly. "Miss Hart, with all due respect, this is a terrible idea." "I'm not asking for permission," Olivia replied. "I'm telling you what's happening." Marcus leaned forward, trying diplomacy. "What Patricia means is that we should think this through strategically. A press conference about the accident opens doors we've worked hard to keep closed. Questions about your health, your judgment, the circumstances. I don't care. You should care," Patricia insisted. "The narrative around you is carefully constructed. Brilliant. Invincible. Untouchable. The moment you admit vulnerability, the moment I admit I'm human," Olivia's voice carried an edge that made everyone sit back. "That I needed help? That someone without money or status or power saved my life." Patricia exchanged glances with the other team members. "That's not what I meant, isn't it?" Olivia stood, walking to the windows. "For the past month, I've let you shape the story. Minimize the accident. Erase the details. Pretend it was just a minor incident handled by our excellent medical team. All very clean. Very controlled. That's our job," Marcus said carefully. "Managing your image." "My image." Olivia turned to face them. "What if I told you my image is a lie?" The room went silent. "What if I told you that the person who saved my life, twice now, is a decorated war hero working night security because the world forgot about him the moment he took off his uniform? What if I told you I offered him money to stay quiet because I was ashamed of needing him?" Patricia set down her coffee. Miss Hart, where is this coming from? It's coming from the realization that I've spent 15 years building an empire and forgetting how to be a decent human being. Olivia's voice softened. I'm holding a press conference. Today, noon. You can help me prepare remarks, or I'll walk out there and say whatever comes to mind. Your choice. 3 hours later, journalists packed into the Hart Tech conference room. Cameras ready, microphones positioned. Nobody had expected this. Olivia Hart didn't do unscheduled press conferences. She certainly didn't do them without carefully vetted talking points and strategic messaging. But there she stood, walking to the podium at exactly noon, carrying no notes, no script, nothing but the weight of something that needed saying. The room quieted. Olivia took a breath and began. Last month, I was in a car accident. I nearly died. Whispers erupted. Cameras flashed. The person who saved my life wasn't a surgeon, wasn't a paramedic, wasn't someone with impressive credentials or a fancy title. She paused, her voice steady but weighted with emotion. It was a single father working the night shift as a hospital security guard. The whispers grew louder. His name is Ethan Ward. At that exact moment, Ethan sat in the hospital cafeteria with Grace, helping her with multiplication tables. His phone buzzed. A text from Jenny. "Dude, turn on the TV now." Confused, Ethan looked up at the cafeteria television mounted in the corner. His entire body went rigid. There was Olivia on every news channel speaking at a press conference. And she was talking about him. "Dad," Grace tugged his sleeve. "That's the lady from the magazines." Ethan couldn't move, couldn't breathe. On screen, Olivia continued, her composure cracking slightly at the edges. Ethan Ward is a decorated combat medic. He served 3 tours of duty, saved dozens of lives under fire. He earned the Silver Star for valor. The camera cut to his military photo. Younger Ethan, dress uniform, medals gleaming. Grace gasped. "Dad, that's you." Other people in the cafeteria were turning, staring. Someone pointed. Recognition spread like ripples in water. Olivia's voice trembled now. Genuine emotion breaking through years of corporate polish. When I asked him to stay quiet about saving me, I didn't know. I didn't know who he was, what he'd sacrificed, what he'd given for this country. She looked directly into the camera, and Ethan felt like she was looking straight at him. I didn't know that after his wife died in a car accident 5 years ago, he left military service to raise his daughter alone. That he took a night security job so he could be there for her. That he traded medals and recognition for bedtime stories and math homework. Tears gathered in Olivia's eyes. Ethan had never seen anything like it. This woman who'd been ice-cold and untouchable, crying on national television. "Ethan Ward showed me something I'd forgotten," she said, her voice barely steady. "He showed me that true leadership isn't about power or control. It's about service. It's about showing up when nobody's watching. It's about doing the right thing, even when there's no reward." The cafeteria had gone completely silent. Every eye was on Ethan now. He sat frozen, Grace gripping his hand with fierce pride. 3 nights ago, at our hospital gala, he saved another life. Olivia continued. An elderly man went into cardiac arrest. And while everyone else, including me, stood there helpless, Ethan Ward dropped to his knees and did what he's always done. He ran toward the crisis instead of away from it. The press conference room erupted in applause. Cameras flashed frantically. Olivia wiped her eyes, not caring how it looked, not caring about the carefully constructed image crumbling around her. Ethan Ward is the kind of person this world needs more of. And I was too blind, too arrogant, too wrapped up in my own importance to see it. She stepped back slightly, steadying herself on the podium. When he saved my life, I offered him money. I asked him to stay quiet. I treated his heroism like an inconvenience to be managed and paid off. Her voice broke. I was wrong. Completely, inexcusably wrong. She looked directly at the camera again, and this time her words came out as barely more than a whisper. "Ethan Ward, if you're watching this, I'm sorry. I'm so deeply sorry." The room erupted again. Questions shouted, journalists on their feet, the controlled chaos of a story breaking wide open. But Olivia raised her hand for silence. "I'm not done." The room settled, everyone leaning forward. Effective immediately, Heart Foundation is establishing the Ward Center for Community Healing, a medical facility offering free health care, mental health services, and veteran support programs. We're breaking ground next month. Gasps echoed through the room. Additionally, I'm creating a scholarship fund in Ethan Ward's name for children of first responders and veterans. Full ride. College, trade school, whatever path they choose. Olivia's hands gripped the podium, knuckles white. I can't undo my mistakes. I can't take back the words I said or the way I treated someone who deserved nothing but gratitude. But I can do better. I can be better. She looked around the room at the journalists, the cameras, the world watching. We all can be better. We can choose to see the heroes walking among us. The security guards, the janitors, the night shift workers who keep our world running while we sleep. They matter. Their service matters. Their sacrifices matter. Tears streamed freely down her face now. Ethan Ward reminded me that compassion is the quietest form of strength. That real power isn't about what you control, it's about who you serve. She stepped back from the podium, and for the first time in her professional life, Olivia Hart walked away from a press conference without taking questions. In the cafeteria, Ethan sat in stunned silence as people began clapping. Slowly at first, then building into something overwhelming. Nurses he'd worked with for years, doctors who'd never noticed him before, patients and families who'd seen him in hallways but never known his story. Grace threw her arms around his neck. "Dad, you're famous." But Ethan wasn't looking at the crowd. He was staring at the television screen where Olivia stood backstage, wiping her eyes, looking more vulnerable and real than he'd ever seen her. She just stripped herself bare in front of the entire world. For him, the media storm hit within minutes. Ethan's phone exploded with calls, texts, notifications he didn't understand. News vans appeared in the hospital parking lot. Reporters tried to get past security, asking for interviews, wanting the story from his perspective. Jenny found him in the break room an hour later, Grace sitting beside him coloring while the world outside went crazy. "You need to get out of here," she said urgently. "There are like 20 reporters at every entrance." Ethan rubbed his face. This is insane. This is what happens when a billionaire CEO publicly apologizes and builds a medical center in your name. Jenny sat down across from him. "Ethan, do you understand what she just did? She didn't have to do any of that. She could have just moved on." "I know. So what are you going to do?" Grace looked up from her coloring. Dad should talk to her. Both adults turned to stare at the 8-year-old. "What, sweetie?" Ethan asked. Grace set down her crayon with the serious expression she got when she'd thought something through. "The lady on TV. She said she was sorry. When someone says sorry, you're supposed to listen. That's what you taught me." Ethan's throat tightened. "That's different, Gracie." "Why?" "Because." He struggled to find words. "Because it's complicated." She looked really sad, Dad. Like when you get sad about Mom. The simple observation hit harder than any press conference could. Jenny reached across the table and squeezed Ethan's hand. Out of the mouths of babes. 3 days passed. The story dominated every news cycle. Social media exploded with debates about class, heroism, and recognition. Ethan's military record was dissected and celebrated. Footage of him performing CPR at the gala went viral. Suddenly, everyone had an opinion about the security guard and the CEO. Job offers flooded in. Private security firms offering triple his salary. Consulting positions. Speaking engagements. One veterans organization wanted him as their national spokesperson. He turned them all down. Except one. The letter came on Heart Foundation letterhead, delivered by courier to his apartment. Inside, written in Olivia's own handwriting. "Ethan, I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I'm asking for something else. A conversation. Not for cameras. Not for PR. Just two people trying to understand each other. Heart Foundation needs a safety and medical preparedness advisor. Part-time. Flexible hours. Salary that reflects actual value. Not what the world thinks security guards are worth. You design emergency protocols, train staff, help us build the Ward Center into something that actually serves people who need it. More importantly, you'd still be there for Grace. Because I've learned that being a good parent matters more than any title or salary ever could. If you're willing to talk, I'll be at Riverside Park tomorrow at 3 p.m. The bench near the oak tree. No assistants. No cameras. Just me, trying to do what you told me to do. Live better. I understand if you don't come, but I hope you will. Olivia. The next afternoon, Ethan stood at the entrance to Riverside Park, Grace's hand in his. She'd insisted on coming, argued with the logic of someone twice her age that if this lady was going to be important in Dad's life, she needed to meet her properly. He spotted Olivia immediately. She sat on the bench in jeans and a simple sweater. No designer labels, no corporate armor. Her hair was pulled back in a casual ponytail. She looked younger, nervous, human. She saw them approaching and stood quickly, wiping her palms on her jeans. "Hi," she said quietly. "Hi." An awkward silence stretched between them. Then Grace stepped forward, studying Olivia with the unflinching directness of children. "Are you the lady who said sorry to my dad on TV?" Olivia knelt down to Grace's eye level. "Yes, I am." "Good. He deserved a sorry." Grace paused, then added, "He's the best person in the world." Olivia's eyes filled with tears. "I believe you. Are you going to be nice to him now?" "I'm going to try very hard to be." Grace considered this, then reached into her pocket and pulled out the silver bracelet Olivia had given her months ago at the hospital. "You gave me this. It says, 'Be brave, little healer.' Do you remember?" Olivia nodded, not trusting her voice. "Dad says healing isn't just for wounded people. It's for people who forgot how to care." Grace held out the bracelet. "Maybe you need it more than me right now." The simplicity of it broke something in Olivia. She accepted the bracelet with shaking hands, and the tears she'd been holding back spilled over. "Thank you," she whispered. Grace nodded solemnly, then turned to Ethan. "I'm going to go play on the swings. You guys should talk about grown-up stuff." She skipped away, leaving two adults staring at each other across years of different lives and choices. Finally, Ethan spoke. "That press conference. I meant every word. You didn't have to do that. Any of it." Olivia sat back down on the bench, and, after a moment, Ethan joined her. "Yes, I did. Not for PR. Not for my image. For me. Because I needed to say it out loud, that I was wrong, that you mattered, that I've been living in a way that made me forget what being human actually means." They sat in silence, watching Grace swing higher and higher, her laughter carrying across the park. "The job offer," Olivia said carefully. "It's real. Not charity. Not guilt. We genuinely need someone with your skills. But more than that," she turned to look at him, "I need people around me who remember what service actually looks like. People who will tell me the truth. People who won't let me forget again." Ethan studied her face, the vulnerability there, the genuine fear that he might say no. "Why does this matter so much to you?" "Because for the first time in 15 years, someone saw through all my walls and told me to live better. And I realized I didn't know how anymore." Her voice dropped to barely above a whisper. "I need to learn, and I think you might be the only person willing to teach me." Ethan looked at his daughter, swinging fearlessly toward the sky. Thought about the medals gathering dust in a box he never opened. Thought about the life he'd built from the wreckage of loss. Small, quiet, invisible, but filled with the only thing that truly mattered. "Love. I'll take the job," he said finally. "On one condition. Anything. You have dinner with us. Me and Grace. Nothing fancy. Just spaghetti and homework and whatever cartoon she's obsessed with this week. Because if you're serious about learning to live better, that's where it starts. Not in boardrooms or foundations or press conferences. In the small moments nobody sees." Olivia smiled through her tears. "I'd like that very much." From the swings, Grace waved enthusiastically. Olivia waved back, and for the first time in longer than she could remember, the future felt like something other than a battlefield to conquer. It felt like a possibility. 1 year later, the morning arrived cold but brilliantly clear. The kind of November day where the sky stretches endless and blue, and the world feels scrubbed clean by autumn wind. The Ward Center for Community Healing stood in the heart of the city's forgotten district, a beautiful contradiction, modern glass and steel rising where boarded-up buildings once stood. Solar panels gleamed on the roof. Community gardens flanked the entrance. A massive stone inscription above the doors read, "Service, Compassion, healing. Hundreds gathered on the lawn for the grand opening. Veterans stood in clusters, some in old uniform jackets, many with tears already streaming down weathered faces. Families from the neighborhood, people who'd never had access to quality health care, held their children's hands and stared at the building like it might disappear if they looked away. News cameras lined the street, but today they felt different. Respectful, reverent, even. Olivia stood backstage in the temporary pavilion, watching the crowd assemble. She wore a simple gray suit, no designer labels, no corporate armor, just professional and present. Marcus stood beside her, tablet in hand, but for once, he wasn't managing crisis. He was just witnessing something good. 5 minutes, Miss Hart. She nodded, but her eyes scanned the crowd, searching. Then she found him. Ethan stood near the back with Grace, who'd grown 3 inches in the past year and lost 2 front teeth. He wore slacks and a button-down shirt, looking uncomfortable with the formality, but present nonetheless. When his eyes met Olivia's across the distance, he offered a small nod. She smiled, feeling the familiar flutter of nerves that had become strangely welcome over the past 12 months. So much had changed. The job had been real, more than real. Ethan had transformed Heart Foundation's approach to emergency services, trained staff across 3 hospitals, designed protocols that had already saved lives. But more than that, he'd done exactly what Olivia had asked. He'd taught her to be human again. Those spaghetti dinners had become weekly traditions. Grace's homework spread across Olivia's dining table, math problems and spelling tests mixing with quarterly reports and board meeting notes. Movie nights where Ethan fell asleep on her couch while Grace and Olivia debated whether Elsa or Moana was the superior Disney princess. Small moments, invisible moments, the kind nobody would put in a press release. The moments that mattered most. Miss Hart. Marcus touched her elbow gently. It's time. Olivia walked to the podium, and the crowd quieted. She gripped the edges, looking out at the faces, so many faces representing so many stories of struggle and survival. A year ago, she began, her voice steady but warm. I almost died. The familiar opening, but it landed differently now. More honest, more earned. The person who saved my life wasn't a surgeon, wasn't someone with impressive credentials. It was a father doing his job, because that's what good people do. They show up. She found Ethan in the crowd again. Ethan Ward, please come up here. He shook his head slightly, the same instinct to stay invisible, to fade into shadows. But Grace pushed him forward with both hands, and the crowd began to applaud, forcing him toward the stage. When he reached the podium, Olivia turned to face him fully. You told me I'd see the sun rise, she said softly, just for him, though the microphone carried it to everyone. I've seen 1,000 sunrises since that night. Every single one because of you. From her jacket pocket, she withdrew a small wooden box. Inside, resting on dark velvet, was a custom medal. Simple, beautiful. Engraved across the center were 4 words. Don't make it fast. Stay. Ethan's breath caught. You told me to stay, Olivia continued, her voice breaking slightly. To keep fighting, to see another day, and then you showed me what to do with those days. She pinned the medal to his chest with gentle, careful hands. Don't fade into the background again, Ethan. Don't become invisible. The world needs people like you. She paused, her eyes glistening. I need people like you. The crowd erupted, standing ovation, cheers echoing across the building and into the neighborhood beyond. But Ethan barely heard it. He was looking at Olivia, really seeing her the way she'd learned to see him. Not the CEO, not the billionaire, just Olivia, a woman who'd been lost and was finding her way back. Thank you, he said quietly. For what? For letting me be part of this. For taking the harder path. Grace appeared on stage without anyone noticing, squeezing between them with the confidence of someone who decided these 2 adults belonged in her life permanently. She held up a drawing she'd made. Ethan kneeling beside a woman in the rain, his jacket covering her, a bright golden heart glowing between them. Written in careful 8-year-old handwriting at the bottom, Dad's jacket. Lady's heart. Both brave. Olivia knelt down, pulling Grace into a hug. Over the child's shoulder, she met Ethan's eyes. They'd walked such different roads to get here. War zones and boardrooms, loss and ambition, medals and millions. All of it meaning nothing until the moment their worlds collided in an emergency room and everything changed. The crowd continued cheering, but the three of them stood together in a bubble of quiet understanding. Then the mayor stepped to the microphone, announcing the official ribbon cutting. Grace was given the honor of cutting it, her small hands guided by Ethan on one side, Olivia on the other. The ribbon fell away, and the doors to the ward center opened. People streamed inside, veterans seeking care they couldn't afford elsewhere, families who'd been turned away from every other facility, the forgotten and overlooked finally being seen. As the crowd flowed past, Ethan turned to watch the sunrise breaking golden through the building's eastern windows. The lights spilled across the lobby floor, illuminating the words carved into the reception desk. Heroes don't fade. They just find new reasons to keep showing up. Grace tugged both their hands, pulling them toward the entrance. Come on, we have to see everything. They followed her inside, into the building that represented so much more than bricks and medicine. It represented second chances, redemption, the slow, difficult work of becoming better than you were. As they crossed the threshold together, Olivia leaned close to Ethan and whispered, I finally understand what you meant. About what? When you said some pain is worth feeling. She smiled, tears on her cheeks. All of this, it hurts sometimes. Being vulnerable, being seen, but it's the good kind of hurt, the kind that means you're healing. Ethan squeezed her hand. Yeah, it really is. Grace ran ahead, exploring with uninhibited joy. Nurses in brand-new scrubs smiled at arriving patients. Veterans embraced each other in the lobby, recognizing kindred spirits. Somewhere a child laughed. Ethan and Olivia stood, together in the sunlit entrance, watching it all unfold. You know what the best part is? Olivia asked. What's that? We're just getting started. The camera pulled back slowly, rising above the building, showing the city spreading out in all directions. Sunrise, painting everything gold. Three people standing together in a doorway. A father, a daughter, and a woman who'd finally learned that true wealth has nothing to do with money. The image faded to a simple quote on screen. Compassion is the quietest form of strength. And the sunrise always comes if you're brave enough to stay and see it. Type sunrise if this story moved you. Subscribe if you believe heroes wear all uniforms, not just the ones we expect.